Om Namah Shivaya. So we'll do the prayers. So we'll just do the Guru Vandanam first, and then end with Sahana Vavatu, and then we will begin. So this is on, if you are unfamiliar with it, I think you are, but it's given in the section on Guru Vandanam. You know, I think this is okay. Yeah, it'll work out okay. Om Shruti Smriti Purananam Alayam Karunalayam Namami Bhagavatpadam Shankaram Lokashankaram Shankaram Shankaracharyam Keshavam Badarayanam Sutra Bhashya Kritau Vande Bhagavantau Punah Punaha Ishvaro Gururatmeti Murti Bheda Vibhagine Vyomavat Vyapta Dehaya Dakshina Murtaye Namaha. Om Sahana Vavatu Sahanau Bhunaktu Sahaviryam Karavabhai Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. So this class on ShriRudram is really aimed at those students that already have a background on Vedanta. So it is, if there are some people who are new to it, which I'm aware of from your introductions, then they may have to be patient. Because I think I would like to make sure that the focus is on the advanced students. Advanced in the sense people that already have an introduction to the basics of Vedanta, which is Atma, Anatma, the Viveka, Vairagya, and Shatka Sampattihi, and all those kinds of things. So I would like to keep this at that level, at a level where I'm not going into the basics. I'm just commenting on it in that sense. So in that sense, the very mantra itself, which is the ShriRudram, is more for mananam rather than for shravanam, because Shravanam means that you have to go through a proper introduction as to what is it that we are doing. And here some parts of Shravanam will also come. So it's not as though it's not a clear-cut difference between the first part and the second part, but the emphasis will be on Mananam rather than Shravanam. Okay? So I just want to make sure of that. So I think we'll give out the texts in the second class today in the afternoon, and I believe that's at 5 o'clock. The copies are there, but I didn't get a chance to get them all, and I think it'll be better. You won't really need to refer to it until later on. So the texts reveal a very interesting way of looking at our lives. So to simplify it somewhat, you can look at your lives in different ways, one of which is called Adi Devika. So the three Shantis that we have, they address these three segments of your life. So one is called Adi Devika, one is Adi Bhautika, and the third one is Adhyatmika. So Adi Devika means the way of looking at your life as something which is very much involved with devatas, including Ishvara. Ishvara, of course, is the primary deva, and all the other ones are helping in that sense. So you can even include Ishvara in that segment. Then the second one is Adi Bhautika, which is all the bhutas, people, things, events, earthquakes, etc. How they affect you, how you can have a peaceful existence with them, and so on. Okay. Then the third one is the one that we want to really focus on, which is Adhyatmika. And in this sense of what I'm talking about, this Adhyatmika looking at things mean, how am I directly affected? What is my composition, my thoughts, my body, my aspirations, my conclusions, my learning? All of those are much more personal to you. Ishvara, you can even look at it this way. Ishvara is an unknown quantity for us. Adi Bhautika also is somewhat away from you, because you don't see earthquakes and floods and all those kinds of things every day. So they can be away from you. But Adhyatmika is you. It is something that you have to really figure out. Who am I? What's happening in my life? What do I do? So the Adhyatmika is something very personal to you. And in that sense, what we should do as we begin our study of ShriRudram is to ask yourself repeatedly, what does it mean for me? What do I need? How am I affected? What is my response to it? And so on. Not look upon Ishvara as a possibility and all of that and so on. This will be our focus. Now, it doesn't mean that you belittle Ishvara's role. But what it does mean is that you look at the aspects of the discussion about Ishvara in your own terms. Okay? And so this is, and I am just giving you a quick introduction. We'll go into this in much more detail. So now I want to go back to the unfinished business of talking about the two texts and the two emphases by the two Swamis that I followed for doing this, Swami Dayanandji and Swami Maheshanandji. Swami Dayanandji has taken a more generic view of all the three, and especially not Adi Bhautika, but Adi Devika and Adhyatmika. So he continuously talks about Ishvara and all the things that Ishvara does and your relationship to Ishvara. He talks about that quite a bit in the way you interpret things and so on. Swami Maheshanandji, on the other hand, takes a much more of a focus on Adhyatmika. And I'll give you one example of this. I'm just giving you, again, I just wanted to just broach this subject. Because I think what will happen is that in these classes, we will focus on things that are really key to the whole thing. We just finished a series of classes from our California where we talked about the Tatparya Nishchaya. What is the central theme? What is the central theme of Bhagavad Gita? What is the central theme of the Upanishads, of Brahma Sutra? And so there is a way of understanding all of that. And so you have Upakrama, then Abhyasa, and then Apurva, and Phalam, and so on. I won't go into the details of that. But one of the aspects of that is Abhyasa. So Abhyasa means that the main topic that you are going to discuss will be repeated over and over again. And you will see this in Sri Rudram a lot. Please help me. It will begin in Anubhaka number 1. Please help me, which will be number 2, number 3, and so on and so forth. And all it means is, this is important. That's what it really means. So we're going to look at this several different ways. But the one thing I just wanted to point out as an example of Adi Devika and Adhyatmika is this. Look at this. This is very interesting. In Anubhaka number 5, unfortunately I left my own copy in California, so I just have to, because I had my notes on it, but I don't really need it. So one thing I think you already know, Siddhartha-ji pointed it out, I asked him to do it, is that the Sri Rudram is given on one side of the page and the other side is blank. So if you wanted to make some notes, that you can actually do that yourself. If you look at Anubhaka number 5, okay? So we chanted that in this morning. So I'll just do one thing. Namas sahasrakshaya cha shatadhanvane cha namo girishaya cha shipibhishtaya cha namo mi dushtamaya cheshumate cha namo o hrasvaya cha vamanaya cha namo brihate cha varshiyase cha. All right, just look at that segment. Namo hrasvaya cha vamanaya cha namo brihate cha varshiyase cha. Okay, this segment. So, the treatment from an Adi Devika standpoint, which Swami Dayananji has focused on in his book, is Ishvara is everywhere. Ishvara is everywhere. And so this, we're going to go through this in more detail. So this is what we call Sarvatmakatvam, Sarveshwaratvam, and so on. So Sarvatmakatva means that he is everywhere. And so as examples of that, he's saying that he is in small people as well as in big people. Makes sense. And he's going to repeat this many, many different times. It's there in good people as well as in bad people. Good situations as well as in bad situations. This is going to be the central theme of it. But look at this aspect that I want to point out. The difference between Adi Devika and Adi Adhyatmika. So the Adi Devika is referring to Vamana. So in one of the Puranas, called, I think it's in Vishnu Purana. I'm not an expert in Purana. Some of you might know this more than I do. But in the Vishnu Purana, there is a story where Aditi, who was so beset with problems with a very powerful king called Mahabali. She was that guy just made her life hell. So she prayed to Vishnu and said, Sir, I need your help. So and then he said, what is your problem? So she talked about that and so on. So he says, okay, I need to kill this somehow or the other, vanquish Mahabali. So Mahabali, of course, is a word for means with great power. With great one which has a lot of power. And they're all disciples of Vishnu. So Vishnu, whatever you want, he will give it to you. And so just same thing in Ravana as well as in Rama's case. So Ravana was a greater bhakta of Shiva than Rama. He was a very powerful guy. And whatever he wanted, Shiva would give it to him because he was a great bhakta. Because Shiva is going to give you whatever you are really aspiring for with all the loyalty and so on. But he had one huge problem: ego. This ahankara that he had, that I am the greatest, I want to make the best possible city in the whole world. This ahankara killed him. If he had just resorted to a complete namaskara to Shiva, he would have been Rama. Rama, on the other hand, was the one who was a great devotee of Shiva, but he said, whatever you want me to do. And so if my father wants me to go to the jungle for 14 years, so be it. So his ahankara was offered to it. This was the difference. Other than that, there was really no other thing. So the Mahabali was a very powerful king, and he was really playing havoc with the lives of a lot of people. So Aditi said, Vishnu, I want your help. And we need to vanquish this person. How? So Vishnu said, okay, we have a scheme. I'm going to be born as a baby in your body. And when the person is born, his name would be Vamana, and it'll be a relatively small, innocent-looking person. He won't really develop to be a huge guy. Kind of like a dwarf, if you may. So, and he says, leave the rest to me. I will take an avatara as Vamana, as a small person. So this is what happened. Vamana was born. And Vamana was, and I don't know all the details, I'm just giving you the details. So Vamana was a great servant of Mahabali. And he went to Mahabali and said, sir, you are the greatest, you are the most wonderful person, and so on and so forth. So he says, what do you want? He says, I want three boons from you. And so one of them is that I want 3 steps. I want some land. I just want some land. He says, how much land do you want? Is that all you want? He says, yes, I just want three steps of land. So he says, okay, granted. Mahabali had a guru. What was his name? Shuka. Huh? Shukraraja. So Shukraraja said, don't give it to him. I smell something, this is not right. Mahabali said, what are you talking about? He came to me and I am a big Raja and I cannot give it to him. All he wants is 3 steps, give it to him. So he took, and as soon as he started to, his wish was granted, he expanded his body and he circumvented the whole earth and the whole antariksha, only in 2 steps. And in the 3rd step, he says, what shall I do? He crushed Mahabali with his feet and became completely free of all problems, and made Aditi also free. So this is a story from the Vishnu Purana from an Adi Devika standpoint. Okay? And you will see this in Swami Dayanandaji's book also, as well as in Swami Maheshanandaji's book. Swami Maheshananda, on the other hand, his emphasis being Adhyatmika, made the following point. What a beautiful point it is. When I read this, I had tears in my eyes. He said, each one of us, when we start learning Vedanta, is a Vamana. We have a very small, literally a small sense of who we are. We are very limited by our family, by my body. And so I am only here at this point. I'm not everywhere. Okay? This is how my sense is, and so on. But if you submit yourself to Rudram, to Shiva, Rudram and Shiva are the same thing, really. Shiva appears as Dakshinamurti, as a teacher, and he also appears as Rudram, that dispenses your karma phala appropriately, as we will see. So it's the same Shiva, same Ishvara. It's not a different person. Just like you have a woman who is a mother, and she's also a worker. They're not two different people. They just have two different aspects of their lives. So similarly here also, Swami Maheshanandaji says, we are all Vamanas. But if we submit to Shiva, we can get extremely big. This was an amazing point. And how can you say that? Because, as we will see, if you are a wave in an ocean, you have a wave buddhi. And somebody asks you, who are you? Say, I'm wave number 1. And that means that your entire estimation of who you are is just this one wave. If that same wave was to be taught that your waviness is just very temporary, very incidental, and not really intrinsic to you, you are in fact the very content of the entire ocean. That small wave can become the whole ocean. It's just a matter of exactly where you put the eye. Similarly is our situation. We put our eye into a very limited set of the body and mind complex, as we are expected to in some way. There's nothing wrong with it, because that's how we are born. But it is not a complete picture. There's much more to it than that. And if we become educated and cognizant of our true identity, the same person who was a Vamana becomes Vishnu. This is the Adhyatmika view of any teacher. And I'm not saying that Swami Dayanandaji, he also points this out from time to time. But Swami Maheshanandaji's emphasis is much more on the Adhyatmika than Adi Devika. So what I will do is, Adi Devika you can actually study pretty much on your own, and we will also study it. But the Adhyatmika is, he will point out to us all the meanings, just like in this particular case, the Vamana case, all the different meanings of Sri Rudram that apply to you personally. And for us to really think about it in that sense. So we look forward to give you an introduction of what that is in these classes. So in that sense, both the texts are very complementary and additive to your understanding. So it'll be, I just want to give you that kind of an idea of what the significance of the two texts are, why I chose two rather than just one. Okay. So what we will do is, as I mentioned last night, with the first two classes of the day, today is an exception because there is no middle class. The first two classes of the day, we will focus on the first 8 verses of ShriRudram. And so it will be up to, I should have that in front of me so I don't waste time. So Swami Maheshananji is going to comment on, starting with Om Namo, Om Namaste Rudramanyava Utota Ishabe Namaha, which we will start today itself, and goes up to I think goes up to Adhyadivo Chadadi Vakt. No, I think more than that. Yeah. Namo astu nilagривaya sahasrakshaya midushe atho ye asya sattva nohen ahantebhyo karan namaha. So somewhere along that, and we won't reach up to that point. I think that will take us many classes. So somewhere between the first 8 or 9, he's going to give it a lot of attention. Then in the second class, the last class of the day, we are just going to go through the entire structure of ShriRudram. And here I'm going to follow both the Swamis, and I've studied both of them and made notes wherever they brought out different things. So you get a complete picture of all the 11 Anubhakas about it. So that I think I can even do today itself. So with that, we will begin a deep study of the ShriRudram. So now I would like to tell you the importance of ShriRudram. Why are we talking about it? Why is it used in all serious yajnas and pujas and vidhis? Why is it so prevalent? What's so special about it? You know, this is the thing. If you look at this Panchakshari Vidya, Panchakshari, Namah Shivaya, the one thing that really excites me is that the same Namah Shivaya, Om, if you add Om to it, Om Namah Shivaya, has been chanted forever. Can you believe the number of people that have chanted it? You cannot even count it. It's infinite. From the beginning of time, we're not talking about 1,000 years or 2,000 years or 5,000 years. Don't worry about those historians. This has been there from the beginning of Kalpa. Om Namah Shivaya. Same Om Namah Shivaya. See how much emphasis has been given to it. Similarly, ShriRudram is a very important set of mantras that is chanted. We just look at the temples. I don't know how many temples we have in Hindu temples on this earth. I would probably guess, I don't know, 10,000, 20,000, something like that. Every one of them either chants it or should chant it multiple times, same one. This is how important it is. Why? Why is it the case? So, if you look at, this is very well given in Swami Maheshananji's book, in the very beginning, in the introduction. It's given a complete list of where all the places that it applies. So, just a very short introduction to it. All the Vedas, all the shakhas of the Vedas, whether it is Rig Veda, Krishna Yajurveda, Shukla Yajurveda, Sama Veda, Atharva Veda, they all have ShriRudram. Again, the same principle applies. Abhyasa. How do you know that some subject is important? By its repetition and the number of times that it appears. It has to be there. Then it is said, this is probably a story, but one of those stories that has a very good meaning. They say Sri Krishna, Avatara of Vishnu, would cite ShriRudram every day. Yajnavalkya, who is considered to be the greatest rishi in our sampradaya, greatest rishi, is well known, is well commented on. His wisdom in the Brihadaranyaka Upanishad, his mastery, his clarity and so on is unparalleled out of all the rishis. Said, you must study ShriRudram. In Kaivalya Upanishad, which we just finished in California, we just took the last one last week, the last verse says, Shatarudriyam. You must, the one who chants Shatarudriyam is can overcome all the papas that you have done in your life. And so the whole Kaivalya Upanishad ends with the emphasis on Shatarudri. Shatarudriyam and ShriRudram are the same. They are just synonyms. So Shata means 100. 100 means it's just like 1,000. Sahasra Shirsha Purushaha. Doesn't mean that a person that has only 1,000 eyes. It means infinite. It means sarvatvakatvam. So similarly, Shatarudriyam also means the Rudra which has so many names of Rudra. And talking of that, ShriRudram has 11 chapters, Anubhakas. And Swami Maheshananji points out, this is a very significant thing. The 11 is a number which is synonymous with Vishwarupa. Vishwarupa means that your understanding of the presence of Ishvara in all possible ways in this world. In Bhagavad Gita, the Vishwarupa Darshanam is also in the 11th chapter. 11th chapter. Because Arjuna was so impressed by Krishna's vision of who he is and what he can do. He says, I want to see it. Krishna said, oh my God, this guy is going to be scared. He says, no, you don't want to. He says, no, can you please? So he says, okay, I have to give you some special eyes because normally people cannot see this. He gave him a darshana of the entire life. All the things that are happening, all the people that are getting crushed by his powers and all the rishis and so on and so forth. Scary. 11th chapter. So the 11 Anubhakas of Sri Rudram, if you really study it, you will see Vishwarupa Darshanam in your own life. All the Shatarudriyam, all the different ways of looking at it and so on, you will have an understanding. I'll give you one example of that. So he says, I am there in disfigured people. Virupaha. Virupaha Vishwarupaha. Very, very interesting. Why would he mention this? Again, if you look at the Adhyatmika view of this, if you see a person who is disfigured or has some problems because you have an arm missing because of some congenital problem or through a war or something like this, you don't pause and remember Ishvara by looking at that person. Because you say, okay, this person has a lot of problems. You feel that I'm very lucky that I've got 2 hands, 2 legs, and so on and so forth. You just look, your old drishti is just basically on this poor guy. The drishti that we should have is there is Ishvara inside that person. Ishvara inside this person. I'm actually going a little bit back and forth as ideas come and so on. So one of the, just from this point itself, one of the descriptions, I think this comes later on, I was planning to do that, but I think I'll bring it out forward. So, the significance of doing puja. Swami Maheshananji points this out very well. He says that when you go to a vigraha, and vigraha could be Ganesha, it could be Dakshinamurti or so on, what is it that what thoughts are going through your mind? And what thought should go through your mind? He says, think about that. What thoughts go through your mind are, if you're looking at Dakshinamurti, what a beautiful vigraha it is. And of course it has some significance, we will talk about that, all the significance of the 4 arms and all the things that he's holding and so on. So you have an idea of what the vigraha is, what is the, and you go there with a prayer and saying, I recognize you, I am your shishya, I'm bowing to you. And so those are the thoughts that we all have. He says, you know what the thought you should have? And this goes back to the Virupaha, Vishwarupaha. The thoughts you should have are, I will not hurt anybody in my life, either with words, thoughts, or deeds, and I will not be hurt by anyone else by words, thoughts, or deeds. Period. Full stop. This is all you should do. We don't do that because we are so busy in our lives. We've got to. This is what the transactional reality is. We are doing things and so on and so forth. But at least in those rare times when you're bowing down to a vigraha, you're going to a temple or your own temple, what should you do? What we normally do is, oh Ganesha, my daughter is dating this guy and I really like him. Make sure that they get married. Or that my son is applying to Harvard University and make sure that he gets it. These are the kind of thoughts we have. Swami Maheshananji says, can I suggest to you something that will be really beneficial to you? These things are also beneficial, but very specific. Very specific. Going back to the Vamana example, you want to conquer the whole world. You don't want just a few steps. And the way to do that, Swami Maheshananji says, is every time you do a puja, you remind yourself, I will not hurt anybody in those 3 ways, and I will not get hurt by anybody with 3 ways. Why? You can guess why. Because there is Shiva in everybody. And there is Shiva in me. Any time you feel badly about yourself, you're insulting the Shiva in you. Don't do it. There's no reason to insult Shiva. feel good about yourself, and feel good about everybody else. If you can maintain that, at least at the time of the puja, you begin to see the presence of Ishvara in all aspects of your vyavahara. It's called the vyavaharika sat, in all vyavahara. So this is, I think, a very good advice. I remember this must have been about 6-7 years ago. So, we have one of the Swamis who graduated from this institution, Swami Tadatmananda. You may have heard him, wonderful person. Known him for so many years. He's junior to me because I went to the classes before him, but I saw his growth come up, and he's so wonderful. So about 6-7 years ago, it's not that long, maybe 4 or 5 years ago. Anyway, Trump was the president, and there was some kind of a function here. And things were really going south in terms of, how this person has taken over the country, and there was some criticism about the right wing and so on and so forth. Anyway, all of that is the background. Swami Tadatmananda gave a wonderful introduction on his talk. What he said is this. He said, before you judge other people and you try to see the goodness in other people, it is very important that you see the goodness in yourself. Until you complete the analysis and stock taking of yourself and accurately assess who you really are, which is essentially Shiva, you cannot expect yourself to be good to others. Why? Because your estimation of others is going to be in the same scale as your estimation about yourself. If you're not happy with yourself, if you're not taking a complete estimation of yourself, the same scale is being used for estimating others. Beautiful point. I thought that was very well put together. So what it means is that before you start reforming the world, reform yourself. Get yourself understood properly. So this is what is the Sarvatma Buddhi. This is what we are really talking about. And so when you see a Virupaha, a disfigured person that happens to come in front of you should be a reminder about the presence of Shiva everywhere. Because the essence of that person is not the frailties of the body, but the very essence of the person, which is Atma. No difference between Paramatma and Jivatma. No difference whatsoever. There is no difference between a room space and the total space. It's just a matter of how we look at it. So the Sarvatma Buddhi, which is what ShriRudram talks about in the 11 chapters, and the Vishwarupaha is aided, it is given as an aid for us to see, understand the presence of Shiva in all aspects of my vyavahara, not in one or two aspects of it. This is why you find that some of us have split personalities. Most of us have split personalities. We are very good to people that we love and like. We are intolerant of people that we don't like. But both are Shivas. On the surface, it's like a test. It is like a test. Once you begin to understand that the likes and dislikes have nothing to do with the presence of Shiva, then your job is done. Until then, you're not there yet. So the whole study of Sri Rudram will be, from an Adhyatmika standpoint, understanding the presence of Shiva in all aspects of my life. And we should be forgiven. We should also be tolerant to ourselves that this is not going to happen overnight. You say, oh, these are good things to do, I must do this. This is not going to happen overnight. Because it has taken us billions of lives to come to this point where we have a particular view of the society and people and so on. And even though the errors of that are being pointed out, it will take a while. It's a new language that we have to see, as we've been talking about in some of the California classes. Anyway, we'll do that. So, in finishing out the importance of Sri Rudram, as I mentioned to you, very present all of the places. In Sutta Samhita, which is also a very important text, this is also pointed out exactly. Shutaradrajim Pite. Okay. Now let me start with a quick overview of the 11 chapters. Again, we will revisit this in more detail, but also the 11 number here is relevant to Pancha Jnanendriyani, Pancha Karmendriyani, and Antahkarana. So these are the 11 things that are indicative of our transactional life, Vyavaharika Buddhi, transactional life. So, transactional life means my attitudes, how I approach things, my view of things. It is consisting of how I take the data in, how I respond to it, and with what kind of a mental attitude. So we should see where the errors are being made. So in that sense, this is also an Adhyatmika view. You can relate to everything in these 11 different ways. Pancha Karmendriyani, Pancha Jnanendriyani, and Antahkarana. You can look at it different ways. There are different ways of counting. But in sense of the progress of understanding Sri Rudram, this way of looking at it is being suggested as a good way to approach your transaction. Because our acharyas point out, what do you mean by, again, this is something I think we'll spend more time on, I'll just give you a brief thing. What do you mean by Vyavaharika Sat? Again, I'm addressing those of you who already know this. As you know, there are 3 kinds of Sat. So one is called Pratibhasika Sat, one is called Vyavaharika Sat, and one is called Paramarthika Sat. Right? So one is subjective reality, which is Pratibhasika Sat. One is objective reality, which is Vyavaharika Sat. And the third one is absolute reality, which is Paramarthika Sat. You know all that. Okay. The reason I'm pointing it out is, I want to look at Vyavaharika Sat in this context. That's all I'm doing. And this took a while for me to also learn, because you see, this is exactly what happens. We categorize things and say, okay, now I know there are three kinds of Sat. Okay, then done. Now you can talk about it, you can impress some people. Did you know there were three kinds of Sat? They'll say, really? What are they? And then you say, Pratibhasika Sat. Pratibhasika Sat means that you have an idea of the world which is not shared by anybody else. This is called Pratibhasika Sat. You say, people don't like me. You suddenly just blurt out, and normally children, when they grow up, they do this and say, people don't like me. Say, why? I don't think that I like you. So already your thesis is not true. He says, no, but people don't like me. So you say, no, this is just your own view. You are okay. Everybody is doing okay. This is called Pratibhasika Sat. Then Vyavaharika Sat means that you are transacting with people who you think you are. Others also see you exactly the same way. I'm a man. You also think I'm a man, not a woman. This is called Vyavaharika Sat. And I thought this is enough and so on. Our acharyas say there is much more to Vyavaharika Sat than just doing this thing. What do you mean by that? What it means is, what is your Vyavahara towards people? What is your attitude? How do you view people? And if you do that wrongly, this is what happens. Our Vyavaharika Sat really changes in life. We have one view of life when we are happy. We have another view of life when we are unhappy. And so that needs to be understood, and the limitations of that have to be looked at. All of that has to be seen. Anyway, so this is the way to look at it in that sense. So now, let's look at the 11 chapters of, I think that's all the time that we will have. I'll give you a very quick introduction, and then we will continue on. So the 11 chapters of this are, the first Anubhaka is, so before I do that, think about ShriRudram in two segments. In fact, I think I will just do that instead of going through all the 11. So let me just give you the two-segment thing, okay? One is Namaha, and the other one is Prarthana. Okay, so I'll just finish with that. That's all I will do. So Namaha means a recognition of the power of Shiva. And Prarthana means something that you are asking for. So there are two different things altogether. Okay? I think Swami Dayananji had once given this very beautiful example. He says, suppose there is a great scientist, like supposing it's Einstein, who visits the University of California campus and gives a lecture. Who would you have introduced Einstein to the audience? Who will you have that? Well, you can have some kind of a graduate student, and the graduate student says, I am very happy to introduce Sri Einstein to you. He is the author of E is equal to mc squared. He is also, this is called Namaha. What it means is, the student really doesn't understand the grandeur of this great scientist. The person who should really introduce him is some Nobel Prize winner who understands the the grandeur, the beauty of what this guy has done. So now going back to the two portions of Sri Rudram that we will see, one is called Namaha, 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 Namaskara, Namaskara, Namaskara. What that indicates is, I am trying to understand your grandeur, and I will study it and I will educate myself and see how great you are. It's like, telling somebody who comes to your home and say, I know how powerful you are. I know how great you are. You're so kind and you give you are a great person. So the other person says, what do you want from me? And now that you've understood how great I am, this is where prarthana comes in. So the Sri Rudram will be segmented in these two areas. One is the continuous Namaha. And so, again, I haven't finished this, I will do this later on. The first Anubhaka is an overall, it has a little bit of prarthana and a little bit of Namaha. Kind of like the second chapter of the Bhagavad Gita. Because the second chapter gives you an entire introduction to Vedanta Shastra. It tells you, Ashocyan Anvashochastvam Pragyavadam Subhashase. It starts with that, Jnanam. Then it talks about karma. Then it talks about bhakti. And it talks about Jita Pragyasya Ka Bhasha. So he says this is what a moksha feels like to a person. How can you be Jivan Mukta? The entire set is given in the second chapter. Then from chapter 3 onwards, significant aspects about them are understood. Similarly, in the very first Anubhaka of Sri Rudram, you will have an overall feeling of what the Namaha and the Prarthana is. Then in the second chapter, second Anubhaka onwards, they will focus in on Prarthana or in Namaha in more detail. And in the end, it will end with a Prarthana again. So this is the structure of Sri Rudram that has been pointed out by our acharyas, and we will study that in starting with the next class. So it's already 9:30, and I close the class with a prayer. Om Asato ma Satgamaya Tamaso ma Jyotirgamaya Mrityor ma Amritam Gamaya. Om Purnamadav Purnamidam Purnat Purnamudachyate Purnasya Purnamadaya Purnamevavashishyate. Om Shanti Shanti Shanti. Hari Om Shri Gurubhyo Namaha. Hari Om.